every one of you here was either hired or better, was promoted from within because at some point in time, you made an impression upon those higher up than you that you possessed the type of discipline and diligence whereby you would follow your company's procedures properly. You also demonstrated that you were compliant with the company's vision and the company's direction, so you would follow the company's protocols. And you also exhibited an ability to be more productive than others in the rank and file. And so the higher-ups determined that you should be promoted to management. Today we're going to talk about the psychology of management. We're going to do it by drawing parallels between medicine and management. Because there's an epidemic in the corporate world that is not being addressed properly. It's being misdiagnosed, as a matter of fact. And if you misdiagnose something in medicine, well, simply speaking, you can't cure it. When you got promoted, you left the rank and file. So today, I want to warn you, we're going to use some medical terminology, and it's going to be foreign. And I don't know about you, but when I get into a situation and I'm learning something new, and a whole bunch of new terms are thrown at me that I'm not familiar with, after a while, my brain just disengages. And it goes, whew, and I start to daydream. Forewarned is forearmed. We're going to use a lot of new terms, but I promise you, I am going to define them, and then I'm going to use them, and I promise you that by the lunch break, you're going to be comfortable with this terminology, and I promise you by the end of the day, you're going to be fluent with the terminology. So here's our first definition. If we consider that for most of you, you were promoted out of what we call the rank and file, we're going to call the rank and file your corporate body. So when you have a group of people that are your subordinates, whether it's a project team or whether it's a department or whether it could be an entire branch office, however many people that is and whoever they are, if they're your direct responsibility, we're going to call that your corporate body. So if they're the corporate body, well, then what does that make you? Well, that makes you the head. And that sounds really good when we say it, except when you get promoted out of the rank and file to become a head, all too often, and this is human nature, people that used to work beside you shoulder to shoulder in the rank and file resent you for getting the promotion, usually for no other reason. They thought they should have got your promotion. So why are we going to call you the head? Because when you're in management, you give directions. When you're in management, you are the person that tells the body what to do. Because in medicine, the head tells the body what to do. And you know what? It's not self-aggrandizing to call you a head, because what do we do in the corporate world? We call people a department head. And we call them a supervisor. When was the last time you said, oh yeah, that's Joe, he's our boss, he's my average visor or my mediocre visor? No, he's a supervisor. And what happens when you're in the military? Well, the rank and file are privates and corporals, but the officers, we call them superior officers. Now, from my philosophical standpoint and from what I'm going to teach you today, I don't believe that anybody's superior to anybody. I just believe that if you're in a position of authority, it just means that you've been authorized by the gentleman on the back who's the CEO of this corporation, the person who brought you all here today and paid to bring you here today, and by the way, the person who's paying me. That gentleman authorized you, and when he authorized you, he gave you certain roles and responsibilities. So at Aararat Consulting, we say being a boss is not a privilege, it's a responsibility. And you have responsibilities. And suddenly, after you got promoted, you also had certain challenges. Well, the very people that thought that you would be compliant to the company's protocols, would be disciplined and diligent to the company's procedures, and exhibited a work ethic of great productivity, those same people also had a belief in you, and the belief was that you could face the challenges that managers have to face. They believed that you could handle the stress and work effectively under the pressure. And that's why they chose you, and not the other people in the rank and file that resent you. So voila, which is French for year ahead. And we still have the corporate body. We're going to be talking about challenges today in your role as a manager. And I'm going to suggest to you that the biggest challenge that you face in being a manager is not how to manage protocols, procedures, and productivity. The biggest challenge you face is how to manage people. And when I teach a group of management this, very often it breaks. People come up and say, I never considered it that, yes, my job is to manage people, because I thought my job was to get people to do the protocols and the procedures and be productive. And it's like, no. If that's all you had to do, then you would be a software programmer and your people would be robots. See, our people aren't robots. Our people are individuals, and our people have psyches, and our people have mental, emotional, and spiritual positions whereby they think, they feel, and they believe. And a lot of times, we have what we call in psychology baggage in those same thoughts, feelings, and belief systems. So part of your job is to figure out what kind of ailment is happening with my corporate body, whereby my corporate body is not as healthy as it should be. See, your new responsibility has very little to do with what you used to do. Now your primary responsibility is to get others to do what you used to do. But let's face it, if they were as talented as you were, if they were as compliant as you were, if they were as diligent as you were, and if they were as productive as you were, well then you wouldn't have been promoted. As a matter of fact, if all of them were as compliant and diligent and productive as you were, we wouldn't need managers at all. Well, you'd be redundant. Imagine a workforce where everybody is self-disciplined. Imagine a workforce where everybody is self-directing. Imagine a workforce where everybody is self-motivated. And then they do the tasks they're supposed to do accurately, with discipline and diligence. And they are compliant, and they have an excellent work ethic. Imagine that type of workforce. Well, then you wouldn't have anything to do. That's why the higher-ups gave you a chance to do something that was completely out of your comfort zone. They gave you a chance to manage people. So let's go back to our parallel between medicine and management. See, if your corporate body has certain ailments and it's suffering, well, just like in medicine, if a body's suffering, we say that its health is compromised. And when the body's health is compromised, we say that the body doesn't function properly or doesn't function optimally. So here's something that I want you to remember. Anything that compromises the health of your corporate body will prevent your people from functioning the way they're supposed to function and performing the way they should be performing. But if you can fix whatever ails them, then your corporate body's mental, emotional, and spiritual dysfunction can be cured. And when that happens, suddenly everybody's on the same page. And that's the number one thing that people ask me when it comes to the psychology of corporate training. How do I get everybody on the same page? How do I get everybody singing from the same songbook? How do we get people to just get along? Because being a playground monitor or referee was not what you thought you were going to be inheriting as a new job responsibility when you got promoted, only to find out that's a big part of the job, and it's a difficult part of the job, and it's a frustrating part of the job, because, as we said earlier, everybody's different. And in medicine, we say every body is different. So if you want to get your corporate body to perform the way it's supposed to perform and do it in harmony so it doesn't stress you and you're not playing the role of referee or a kindergarten playground monitor, then when we approach problems from medicine, the first thing we do is we look for clinical signs. And the clinical signs can either be internal or external. So we're going to start with the external, because see, the external is what we call the manifested signs. You see, when the body's ill, one of three things has happened. Either something's infected the body, or something's assaulted the body, or something has injured the body. Well, external manifestations point you to what's happening internally. So, if we were to look at this picture of a gentleman that's got a runny nose, and from the way he's talking, his sinuses are obviously congested, and he's sneezing in front of you at his appointment, well, it's pretty obvious what the diagnosis is. I mean, this man's got a cold. Those are external manifestations of an internal virus. Remember, we said that as the body suffers, then the body's function is compromised. Well, there's a cause and effect parallel between the human body and your corporate body. Along these parallel lines, anything that compromises the health of your collective workforce, your corporate body, compromises the overall health and welfare of the corporation itself. Now, here's where there's a disjoint, and here's why you're ahead and why they're still in the rank and file. Because as a head, when you participate in management meetings, you become aware or privy of things like accounting reports and financial statements and annual reports. And what you come to realize that maybe you didn't know when you were in the rank and file is, my gosh, if the company isn't profitable, I can't get paid. If the company starts to lose market share or lose sales or lose profits because expenses go up while revenue goes down, well, my gosh, then you know what we do in medicine? If something's irreversibly ill, we amputate it. And that's when you close down branch offices. That's when you cut back staff. That's when you transfer the responsibility of a department at one part of the country, and then you put it in another part of the country or a central part. But the fact of the matter is, if everybody isn't focused on the idea that we're in business to make a profit, if everybody doesn't understand that, then everybody's at risk. But once you got into the higher echelons of management, you started to understand that mathematical truism, and you started to see the cause and effect. So there's a cause and effect, a parallel between medicine and management. Anything that compromises the health and welfare of the people in your corporate body compromises the entire corporate body. Why? Because in medicine we say if one part of the body's hurting, it affects all parts. Well, if your corporate body is dysfunctional, it can and will affect the other parts of the corporate body. So a very critical part of your job, now that you're a manager, is to determine whatever ails your corporate body. And then, once you determine whatever ails them, you have to come up with what we call a treatment plan in medicine, except you would call it a management strategy. So you have to determine what ails them, and then you have to determine a treatment strategy, and then you have to cure them. Because as managers, that's what you were entrusted to do. Just like as doctors, we are entrusted with the sacred oath to do no harm. It's the first part of the Hippocratic Oath. But in order for us to do more harm, I tell you what, everybody, we got to get the right diagnosis. Because if we do the wrong diagnosis, then the body suffers. And sometimes the body dies. And if you don't make the right diagnosis as to what is causing your corporate body to be ill, then there's a very good chance that the people in your corporate body will lose their job, lose their security, and when that happens psychologically, people lose their sense of self-worth, and they lose their sense of self-esteem, and often they lose their sense of self-identity. So, if the psychology of management is that you have to help your people, the rank and file, your corporate body, think like a head, then one of the first things you need to help them understand is that when you tell them the truth about what's happening with market share and that things are going down, they need to understand that, yes, profit is important. And at Aararat, we call this an SST, a short, succinct thought. And what they need to understand is that profit is not a four-letter word, but loss is. By the end of today, you're going to be able to think like a doctor. You're going to be able to identify external and internal causative factors like a doctor. You're going to learn how to treatment plan, which in management we call that a management strategy. You can learn how to have a management strategy to treat whatever ails them, and then we're going to teach you how to cure it. And you're going to say, but I don't know anything about psychology, and I didn't go to school for all those years, and I didn't think this was part of my job. Well, yeah, that was that IC moment we talked about. IC stands for now I comprehend. A big part of my job is to understand my people. If we look at the physical manifestations of a workforce that's non-functional, we come up with three very obvious external manifestations. The workforce is A, apathetic, B, despondent, and C, complacent. These are the three clinical manifestations of a corporate disease that is so widespread that it's considered an epidemic. A corporate disease that the Gallup people did a survey over a number of years, 1.4 million respondents, 142 countries. And they came to the conclusion that 71% of workers are disengaged at work. And if your corporate body is disengaged from the head, then it's never going to function the way it's supposed to. It's never going to perform the way it could. And you know what? It might just get sick and die. So our collective goal for today is to teach you how to strategically approach people's illness, or in psychology we call it dysfunction, dysfunctional mindsets, dysfunctional behavior, and we're going to teach you how to identify the internal causes of why they act and think the way they act and think. Because if you don't get to the causative roots, then just think of a dandelion. Everybody wants a beautiful, lush green lawn. And yet, just like zits, these dandelion heads pop up. And once these dandelion heads start to pop up, we know, because it's an external manifestation of an internal problem, we know that there's dandelions infecting your lawn. And when you look at a dandelion, forget about the yellow head, because at the base of a dandelion, there's these extremely long, broad leaves. And you know what those leaves do? They suck up sunshine, they suck up moisture, and they rob the ground of nutrients for the health and welfare of a weed. If you look at dandelion plants up close, in other words, like a doctor, you start to take a deeper examination, you will find that the ground around a dandelion plant is devoid of grass. Why? Because the dandelion has sucked up all the nutrients, so around a dandelion plant, what you typically find is just dirt. You say, well, if it's just dirt, then how's the dandelion still alive? Because its roots go deep. And the only way to cure a lawn from dandelions is to pull it up by the roots and examine the roots. Today, we're going to teach you how to examine the roots of dysfunctional thinking and mindsets. And like I said, by the end of the day, you're going to be able to think like a doctor. You're going to be able to diagnose like a doctor. You're going to be able to come up with treatment strategies like a doctor. And you will be able to cure your people's disease.